So I'm here today at ITV Studios. Now we're here today to interview Lucy Meacock. Now Lucy has been in the industry for a long, long time. Now we're going to get inside now, we're going to have a word with Lucy and just see what great advice she can give for you budding journalists. So Lucy, thank you for joining us today.
Pleasure.
You've been in the industry a long time, haven't you? Now what first was it that interested you about journalism?
I think I've always been naturally very nosy, and I've always asked lots of questions from as young as I can remember. I always used to ask questions, probably really, really annoying, but it seems like it just had to be the job for me.
Mm-hmm. Great. And you've been with Granada Reports now, haven't you, for over 20 years. What do you most enjoy about that job?
The best thing about being on Granada Reports is that no 2 days are ever the same. You never know what's going to happen when you come into work. Mm-hmm. The atmosphere in the office is great. We work very closely as a team. And it's a small team, so we all have to kind of pull together and get on with it. But we're so lucky as presenters. You can interview anybody from politicians to pop stars to people who've just been caught up in the news completely unexpectedly. And they're often actually the nicest people of all to interview, it has to be said.
Where do you see the future lying for you now? Is there anything else on the horizon for you?
I've started to mentor people as well, some young people, which I've really enjoyed passing on perhaps some of the skills that you learn to other people. You get a lot of satisfaction out of that. You sort of think it's been worthwhile, all of the hard slog that you've put into learning things for yourself, if you can hand that on to the next generation.
So you do cover a wide range of stories. What are the most difficult stories that you've had to cover? And obviously for yourself, what's been the most emotional stories?
It's really difficult to say because I think almost daily you have a diet of terribly sad and tragic stories to deal with. I think the ones that stand out inevitably, Hillsborough, which is going back a long, long time. I think the complete shock of the scale of the deaths at Hillsborough. And the fact that still people want answers about what happened that day, all these years later. And we've really tried to follow that story through. And ITV as a company has made numerous different productions to try and keep that very much in the forefront of people's minds. And it's good now to see the politicians discussing it again. So that's one that's very close to my heart.
Obviously, if young people want to achieve a career and they're extremely ambitious, they want to become journalists, news reporters, what would you actually advise them to do? Where would you advise them to start off with their career?
Well, it depends very much on what you want to do in the media. A lot of people just want to get on the telly. I mean, I didn't want to do that. I wanted to be a journalist first and foremost, and I wanted to work on newspapers, and I started on newspapers, and I loved that. But it soon became very clear to me that in newspapers, there are some times when on national papers, reporters are under so much pressure to find a story that they are tempted to make up what someone has said or perhaps stretch the truth a little bit. I didn't want to be a part of that. And in radio and television, I think someone has to say what goes out on air because you obviously get it on camera and they can't dispute that. It is the truth. So that really took me down the path into television. But I always think of myself as a journalist first and foremost. For a young person wanting to get into the business, it's obviously very, very competitive, but it's always been competitive. And I remember when I was at school, my careers advisor saying to me, when I said I wanted to be a journalist, she said, don't be so ridiculous. It's like wanting to be an actor or one of the glamorous professions and it will never happen. Lucy, get over it. I don't know whether she did that on purpose because she knew that I was so stubborn that once she'd said that to me, it was just the incentive I needed to prove her wrong. And I think you do have to be quite determined. You have to be very persistent. I began writing to the editor of the Chester Chronicle when I was 16, and I kept writing to him for 2 years. He probably thought I was a stalker. And in the end, he gave in and gave me an interview. And it's things like that, really. You've got to know what you want and then approach somebody who, if you want to be a journalist, local newspapers are great. They do a terrific job to start off with. Local radio, certainly regional television as well. Don't be scared. Someone has to get the jobs in the media, and there's no reason at all why it shouldn't be you or the next person. No reason at all.